If you close your eyes.
Close my eyes? You got it. Yeah, I suck at Photoshop.
And imagined an economist. You'd probably think of a slightly nerdy white man.
My God, you're right! What kind of witchcraft is this?
And on average, you'd be right.
Right?
Historically, economics has been a man's discipline. So I went to Harvard University last autumn to visit the faculty, and their central staircase had portraits of 30, 40 of their emeritus professors, these kind of great minds in economics. Not one woman. So that's a historical issue, but it persists.
That's a historical issue, but it persists. When I think of an issue, I think of a situation that can or should be addressed. Like a problem. But you can't address that issue. It's not a historical issue, it's a historical fact. And that fact will persist because it's a fact. Okay, all right. I am already overthinking this. God forbid. So let's back up slightly. Our speaker is Somaya Keynes, an economics and trade correspondent at The Economist magazine. She has a BA in economics and a Master's of Philosophy in Economics Research, and both degrees come from Cambridge University. And in her career, she has worked in economics research, obviously, advised policy at a financial company, and is now an economics journalist. And her presentation today asks the question, why are there so few women in economics? Well, I am very curious to know the answer from our highly accredited expert. So, let's find out.
So, Shelley Lundberg, under the Committee for the Status of Women in the Economics Profession, they've documented how many women there are today in economics and academic economics and in its senior ranks. They found that in the top 10 academic economics departments in the US, 9% of them were women.
Okay, just so we know what we're talking about here, tenured professors in the top 10 American economics departments. So they took all of the economics departments in the entire United States, whittled that down to just the top 10, and of those top 10, counted how many tenured professors there were who were female. Tenured being something that someone conceivably earns after a dedicated and honored career. Okay, well, that is a lot of filters to go through to reach those numbers. But, okay, this is our speaker's premier example to highlight the issue. Moving on.
Donna Ginther and Shulamit Khan have compared economics to other subjects. Maybe this is an academia thing. Turns out no. Economics has a much worse gender imbalance problem than the social sciences. It's comparable to maths, computer science, physical sciences.
A gender imbalance problem. Okay, I know this might sound like a dumb question, but what evidence is there that that is a problem? I mean, it may indeed be a statistical fact. I'll stipulate to that. But what makes it a problem? Is every demographic disparity in an industry or vocation inherently a problem? If so, tell me about the gender demographics of trash collectors?
So if there are so few women, particularly in the senior ranks of academic economics, the obvious question is why?
Sure. And you are here to enlighten us, I assume.
Luckily, this is economics. This is effectively a labour markets decision, a work decision, and economists love thinking about work decisions. In fact, they've kind of got a simple framework for thinking about how people make the decision to become an academic economist. So put yourself in the mind of an economist, have this kind of simple framework, and there are three things that could be driving it. So maybe it's preferences. Maybe women just don't really like economics. Maybe they're put off by the maths.
Excellent. Yes, let us explore all of the possibilities. So, it could just be a matter of personal preference. Got it.
Or maybe it's ability, maybe it's productivity. In academic economics, basically what matters is how many articles you churn out and in how good a journal they're in. Maybe women and men publish at different rates in different quality journals.
All right, so we have that it might be a lack of interest or personal preference, or a lack of ability and or productivity. Got it.
Or maybe it's prejudice. Maybe it's something to do with the fact that women face constraints that men do not. Maybe it's discrimination.
Well, fair enough. So our three possibilities are personal preference, inherent ability, or inability, as the case may be, and overt discrimination. Any one of those, or a combination, could account for the gender disparity. All right, I am ready to be educated. What evidence has our speaker collected to answer this question of why once and for all?
Now, which of these three is driving this really matters. It matters for whose problem this is to solve. If you think of yourself from the perspective of someone making hiring decisions or promotion decisions, then if women don't want the academic jobs, or if they're just not as well qualified as the men who are knocking on your door, then maybe that's not their problem to solve. And some would argue that they shouldn't be trying to solve it.
Well, again, you still have not outlined how the mere presence of a gender disparity is a problem. And you've already shown us that women both can and are taking enough interest in and doing enough work to rise to the highest levels of economic academia. It's just that, apparently, there are not enough women to make you happy. And I would love to know why that, in and of itself, represents a problem.
Alternatively, if it's prejudice, if women face constraints that men do not, then not only does that mean that good researchers are being shut out of academic economics, it also means that it is very much their problem to solve.
Okay, yes. If the disparity exists based solely on unfair treatment or discrimination in academia, then that would certainly be a problem. Of course, you would have to prove that to be the case to then say the disparity represents a problem. But our speaker has already classified the situation as a problem before offering proof thereof. It almost seems like she's assuming a conclusion ahead of having evidence for it.
Okay, so before we go on, I'm going to give you 2 warnings.
Warnings? Okay.
So the first warning is about this very human tendency that we have towards motivated reasoning. So imagine you're a woman and you haven't succeeded where a male colleague has. It's much more comforting to think that your own failings are because of the system than your own personal shortcomings.
Yes, I agree. That can be a mechanism of the ego trying to save itself from objective introspection. it would also create a certain level of skepticism in an observer over accusations of discrimination.
The second warning that I'm going to give you is something about the reality of academic economics departments today. So I wrote this big piece on women in economics for The Economist, and after I did, someone got in touch with me about what life was like in the 1980s, and she told me about George Stigler, this Nobel laureate in economics, telling his class of graduate students at the University of Chicago that the day the faculty hired a woman would be the day that he would leave, because of the deterioration in quality that would signal about the department.
Okay, I love that face that she is making there. I think I may have just found my thumbnail. But, okay, you had an old professor in the 1980s who was sexist. Is that representative of all academic departments today, then?
I don't think that kind of attitude is anywhere near as widespread today. And in fact, I think many people making hiring decisions would be horrified to think that they treated men and women any differently.
Okay, so if that sort of attitude is defunct in modern academia, then why did you bring it up?
And that all means that whatever the problem is, if there is discrimination, if there is prejudice, then it's going to be subtle. It's going to be really hard to uncover and really hard to fix.
Oh, so in the absence of obvious and overt discrimination, if there is discrimination causing the disparity, it is going to be subtle, difficult to see, and difficult to address. So, also difficult to prove. And if it's difficult to prove, is that because it's so well hidden, or because there's no evidence for it? I cannot wait to find out.
Okay, so some answers. And I should confess right now that I don't have all of the answers.
You don't have all of the answers. Maybe you should come back to give this talk when you do have the answers. Otherwise, aren't you just wasting everyone's time?
But you can think of economists as detectives. We can find some clues as to what is going on here. So, clue number 1. Women drop out early. Women are just over half of undergraduates in the US and the UK, but they're a third of economics undergraduates. Women are making this decision very early on.
Okay, well, given the 3 options for causation that you have provided, dropping out early could be due to any of the 3, or a combination thereof.
The other clue is that it's really difficult to explain the gender gap by pointing to maths. You can explain some of it. Women are just much less likely to do things like maths A-level. But you really can't explain the whole thing. There's this unexplained bit. There's something about economics that women just don't seem to like.
So, clue number 1 is that they drop out early. Clue number 2 is the inexplicable reason that they do not seem to be interested in economics in the first place. You know, the feeling that you are wasting all of our time is growing.
So maybe this is about preferences. Maybe economics is so abstract. Women don't like that. Maybe there are social norms about what an economist is that are kind of nudging women away from the subject.
Maybe. Or maybe women, on average, split their time between work and family. And if you decide to sacrifice work for family, it is difficult to become a tenured professor. Or maybe it is because of mind control rays from Pluto that are telling women that math sucks. I mean, we can do maybes all day. Do you have anything substantive for us?
So I always kind of laugh when I think about this bit, because maybe this is one area where actually economists need some help from the sociologists to work out what's going on. Okay, so that's the first set of clues. But we need more clues.
Oh, I'm a clue. I'm our first clue. I've waited so long to be a clue.
Because women drop out early, but then they carry on dropping out. After women enter along this kind of academic job track, they drop out at higher rates than men. The gender imbalance worsens as you get more and more senior along the academic track.
Yes, you already illustrated that with your very first pie chart. Is our speaker going to stop reiterating the same information and move on to something of probative value?
So when I went to Harvard, I met this economist called Heather Sarsens. Now, remember that framework that I just told you about? Maybe it's preferences, maybe it's productivity, or maybe it's prejudice. Now, one place we could look for clues is to compare men and women who were equally productive, and then see if they face different chances of success. If there's prejudice, then an identically productive woman should succeed at the same rate as a man.
Well, not necessarily. And I'm not pausing on any basis of gender, but setting aside gender, equal amounts of productivity does not inherently equate to equal amounts of success. Take authors, for example. Harper Lee published only one book in the course of her lifetime, To Kill a Mockingbird, and it became one of the most celebrated American novels of all time. Whereas Sue Grafton, a mystery writer, wrote over 25 novels in her life. She had a successful career, but none of her books ever made the same impact as Lee's single book. This is just a long way of saying quantity does not necessarily equate to quality. And I would hope quality is what we are looking for in professors of higher education.
So Heather at Harvard asked exactly that question. She tried to do that detective work. So she gathered CVs of economists from the top 30 American PhD granting institutions, and she looked to see their chances of tenure 6 to 8 years after getting their first academic position. So when she did that, she just looked at the raw numbers. She found that men got tenure within that time period at a rate of 75%, women at a rate of 52%. It's a big gap.
Yes, another statistical disparity, which in and of itself proves nothing.
But maybe they're less productive. Maybe we can explain this through productivity. So she compared that to how many papers they had been producing. And she found what looks like a smoking gun. It looks like women need to publish more papers to see the same chances of getting promoted.
Uh-huh. But
There's a problem.
there's a problem?
There's a big problem.
There's a big problem?
Which is that I gave you this neat framework, fine, just measure productivity and look at the chances of success. But in some cases, it's really hard to measure productivity.
Well, if productivity is difficult to prove, then you don't know how productive women or men are, do you?
So another twist to this tale is that in academic economics, you can publish papers on your own or with other people. And when you collaborate, when you co-author, the order of the authors isn't given in order of who did the most work. It's given in alphabetical order.
Okay. I have no idea where this is going.
So Heather found a funny thing. When she compared men and women who'd published papers on their own, one extra paper published on your own was associated with the same chances, the same boost in their chances of getting promoted for men and women. When men published papers with other men, they also saw a boost in their chances of success. But when women published with other men, they didn't get the same credit. They didn't get that same bump in their chances of getting promoted.
Okay. So, are all academic papers created independently or in association with others always of equal merit towards promotion? I must be misunderstanding something.
So the problem here is that it's impossible to prove definitively that maybe women just weren't putting in as much effort as the men when they collaborated.
Well, on that same score, it is also impossible to prove that anyone on the paper did any work at all, or that one person did all of the work and everyone else just sat around drinking whiskey, or that they all did an equal amount of work. So, wait, what point is our speaker trying to make here?
You can't kind of go back and show 100% that that's not what was happening, because productivity, it's just hard to measure.
So, it's impossible to measure productivity in regards to collaborative papers because you cannot know the extent of each participant's contribution. So, women should only publish papers all by themselves in order to retain all of the credit? Is that the lesson here?
The more likely explanation for what's going on is that in the absence of full information, promoters went with their gut, and their gut told them that the woman had contributed less.
The most likely explanation is that promoters went with their gut and assumed the woman was the least productive of the bunch. So, the most likely explanation for the gender disparity in economic academia is that all persons in positions of promoting power are sexist. Got it. Now, do you have any proof of that?
But that problem of productivity being hard to measure and making it hard to prove that this is bias is exactly the same problem that opens up this avenue for this kind of gut reaction, this kind of fuzzy implicit bias to act.
So the fact that productivity is difficult, if not impossible to measure, provides the cover that implicit bias needs in order to act. So the inherently sexist promoters in academia are counting on the abstract concept of productivity to conceal their sexism when assessing someone's productivity ahead of consideration for tenure. Wow, that is an incredible theory. Now, do you happen to have any, I don't know, proof?
Okay, so that's one big set of clues here, this work by Heather.
Your clues sounded a lot more like guesswork.
And the second set is by Erin Hengel. So I first met Erin when I was here doing my master's at Cambridge. She's now at the University of Liverpool. And she wanted to dig deeper into this idea of productivity. So I said, just compare productivity between men and women and look at their chances of success. But what if the very measure of productivity is somehow tilted against women? So she analyzed 9,000 article abstracts in economics. And she analyzed them to see how readable they were. And lo and behold, she found that ones written by women were clearer and more readable than ones written by men.
More readable. I have no idea what that means. Does more readable equate to the same thing as high quality? Because Goldilocks and the Three Bears is certainly more readable than To Kill a Mockingbird, but only one of them won a Pulitzer.
And that's a gap that opened up as the publications process went on. Women weren't getting any credit for their clearer writing. And she looked at one journal and found that it took women 6 months longer for their papers to go through the publications process than men. So this is alarming. This is consistent with the idea that women are being set higher standards than men. More time editing your articles to make them clearer is less time writing articles. What if that very measure of productivity is biased against women?
What if? Well, what if it isn't?
Okay, so I've been asking the question, why are there so few women in economics? Why are there so few senior women in economics? And I think there are some strong clues to suggest that at least part of the reason is that women face barriers that men do not.
Part of the reason. Well, how big a part is that, though? And you haven't shown that there are barriers. You have derived conspiracy theories of barriers based on statistics. And statistics alone do not prove causation. And where is the argument for a lack of interest or a lack of ability? Why haven't you shown the other two theories are less likely by trying to prove that they are the reason and then finding out that they are not?
But that's not actually the main message I want to leave you with. I think the more important message is that this is really difficult. It's really difficult to disentangle these different reasons for gender imbalances.
Yes, I am sure it is very hard work. But you sound more like you're making excuses for not having an answer to provide us. So again, why bother giving this talk?
You can use one framework that seems very neat and simple, but that might be hiding the very messages that you need. So productivity can be hard to measure. And what if the very measures that you're using have the same bias in them as the ones you're trying to correct? So I think essentially we need to look for some more clues. And I hope we do, because it would be really great to have more women in economics, just like the ones that I'm showing here on the screen. Thank you.
Right. It would be great. But, why would it be great? What does vagina have to do with the quality of economics research and education? Well, obviously I am not going to get an answer to that question because our speaker had no answers. Just accusations of wrongdoing without proof. But still, the question remains. Why are there so few women in economics? Or, more specifically, why are there so few female, tenured economics professors? Well, maybe our speaker should look into a mirror.
I'm a clue. I'm our first clue.
Because with her education and interest in the subject, why isn't she a tenured economics professor? Could it be because she's perfectly happy to present theories on the basis of what-ifs and maybes? Could it be that she's satisfied to craft a presentation which claims that there is a problem of discrimination in academia, but then offers no proof of such, and instead relies on statistics to support an underlying cause? Could it be that our speaker is merely an ideologue, lacking the objectivity necessary to truly succeed in real academia? I have no clue. But then, neither does our speaker, it seems. As always, Thank you for watching.